Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hooligan Report. I'm your host, as always, SM, and with me today I have Bojan.
Hi guys.
It's been a little while since we've recorded an episode. Fair bits happened in the Premier League since our last episode. We'll start with the United-Liverpool game, but there's a few other pretty big talking points as well, with City crushing Stoke in their game, as well as arguably an upset from Watford against Arsenal, but perhaps more par for the course with the way that Silva's got them going this season. We'll start with that United-Liverpool game, though, which was sort of... It's the most anticipated game whenever it's coming up. Everyone says, regardless of the results, it's always the most anticipated game. Early game on SBS, 10:30 at night. Great viewing time for people in Australia, but bit of a fizzer in the end, and sort of par for the course with the way those games have gone in recent years. So, what did you make of it, Bojan, and were you happy with the result?
I was fine with the result. Not really terribly pleased with the performance. I just think that we weren't very fluid going forward. I mean, both teams set up pretty defensively. It wasn't as bad a game as everyone says, but it obviously wasn't a thriller either. But Liverpool kind of sat back a bit and controlled most of the possession, and United kind of sat back and waited for counter-attacks with space in behind. And they had a couple of chances. One great chance and an absolute worldie save from De Gea. Kept it to 0-0 when Lukaku had his chance, and it was kind of a similar game to last year's game at Anfield, where Ibrahimovic had one glorious chance, missed it, and that was that.
Yeah.
So I guess the most disappointing bit is that Mourinho made Ashley Young and Martial, and then Rashford when Rashford came on, kind of protect the fullbacks. So they couldn't get up to support Lukaku at all. So when the few times he did get the ball, he was totally isolated, and he had the defensive midfielders kind of coming down on him with the centre halves behind, closing down. So there wasn't really much he could do. So, but in all these games, everyone just remembers the result, really. 0-0.
And as you say, it's very similar to the game last season, one shot on target in each of those games. I guess somebody that's escaped a lot of criticism in some senses from this game is Jurgen Klopp, and your point there about the fact that the game was quite contained and quite tight rings true with what Mourinho was saying after the game about sort of waiting for Klopp to try and change the game and to try and attack and to break the game open. Is there more of an onus on Klopp as the home manager to do that in a game, and is there more criticism therefore that should be directed at the home manager for really sort of sitting back and containing the game?
Well, I think that should always be the case. Because you could argue Liverpool haven't won before they beat Maribor a couple of days ago. They had one win in 8, I think. So, or one win in 7 coming into the derby against United. So, I guess Mourinho's thinking was that Klopp needs a result here, so he's going to come out at some stage, and it just kind of never materialised. But saying that, I know there's been arguments about Mourinho. Well, the way Man City are playing, maybe he has to come out and get on the front foot and try and beat these kind of top 6 teams away. Whereas it's the big debate for me really is like in previous years and throughout Mourinho's career, he's been happy to take a point away and then try and win at home against the top 6 teams, and that's been generally enough to win league titles and Champions League titles. Now, is it going to be enough with the form that Man City are in if they keep it up the whole year? I mean, that's the big debate.
Yeah, and as you say there, I guess on the flip side to the criticism of Klopp is the fact that Liverpool have one win in 8, or they had one win in 8, were without Sadio Mane, and we're looking quite fragile, especially defensively, even against a team like a Newcastle, a Burnley, or whoever. They were conceding goals, and the fact that United didn't generally seem like they were trying to score. Obviously, there were patches of the games where there were counter-attacking opportunities, and it didn't translate into shots on target or genuine chances. Do you feel like with the budget, with the amount of money that's been spent on this team, with the sort of desire this season to really win back the title, that you're sort of giving a lot of ground up to Man City, as you say, who on the same weekend go off and beat Stoke 7-2? Obviously, you brought a bit of a different scenario for them, but it's still got to send some sort of message.
Yes and no. I mean, Sadio Mane being out for Liverpool was obviously huge for them because, in my opinion, he's their best player. Well, at the very least, he's their most dangerous player. He's a player you kind of fear whenever you're playing them more than anyone else. But I think it's been significantly glossed over the fact that Eric Bailey was missing, so our best centre half was missing, and our best centre midfielder Paul Pogba was also missing. So if we'd been at full strength and played the way we did and set up the way we did, I'd have been a lot more disappointed than I am considering that.
Fair enough. Well, we will talk about those crosstown rivals now in Man City and their pretty tremendous result against Stoke. I think probably on one of the last podcasts that we did before this one, I think I made the comment to Cruyff that it was a City team that was really sort of struggling to start the season, but once they gelled, they'd become quite a terrific attacking force, and that really seems to have happened the last 3 or 4 games, really, so it kind of shows how long it's been since I've made those comments. It's pretty rare that you get a team like Stoke sort of, I think they said in a tweet, and I think Hughes said himself after the game, you just got to sit back and admire what City did to some extent because of the fact that they were just seemingly unstoppable. And I think especially for that second, or I think it might have been the third goal that Sterling scored, where they just passed it from the back, and it was just like watching a game of FIFA where they're pinging these passes around, doing these triangles of passing, moving it up the field, looking for the opportunity. When it didn't come, they pass it back, create a new opportunity, and Sterling taps it in. So pretty amazing football to be watching.
Well, it was quite reminiscent of the kind of ruthless Ferguson teams that would rack up big results away at home against minnows and that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that people need to kind of, I guess, look at the fact that it's only been 8 or 9 games into the season. I mean, I'd be surprised, purely because no one's ever done it, if they can kind of keep up this level of attacking performance throughout the whole season. You have international breaks which break up your rhythm. You've got key injuries to key players that can break up your rhythm too. You've got stifling managers who are just trying to set up for a 0-0 with everyone behind the ball, that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's going to be as simple as, well, there's 38 games in the season, let's multiply that by 3 and that's how many points that they're going to have. But at the moment, they're playing some exhilarating football, particularly going forward. I mean, there's obviously still question marks with their defence, but they did concede 2 goals to Stoke at home. But, at this stage, you can't really fault them because no one's been able to challenge them.
And I guess the big thing from their point of view as well is that in previous seasons they might have gone on a run of form like this, but it would have been quite dependent on a couple of players, in particular Aguero and maybe a Yaya Toure or someone like that in previous seasons, David Silva as well. This season it feels much more that there's this shared scoring. I mean, Sané, Sterling, Silva, Jesus, Aguero when he's fit, De Bruyne. I mean, it's just pretty incredible, the attacking talent that they have. As you say, though, of course, defence is still probably their big issue.
Yeah, I mean, on paper at least. I mean, as I said, no one's trying to exploit it yet. There are areas where you can exploit that defence, particularly in behind those attacking fullbacks. And they've been exploited on occasion, but thankfully for them, they're usually kind of a few goals up when they get exploited. You know what I mean? So it hasn't really
it was interesting.
Results-wise, but
I think going into half-time against Stoke, it was 3-2. So it was a game that, despite the fact that they'd been coasting early in, all of a sudden could have gone one of 2 ways in that second half.
Absolutely. But you've got to give them credit at the moment for that. But yeah, the media narrative and the narrative on the board has amused me a lot. Like we have a 0-0 draw, they go out and batter Stoke 7-2, and suddenly Mourinho's playing the worst football in the world and he's terrible and he's faster, and United can't win the league, and they're the best team of all time. So that's kind of been quite amusing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a long season, mate. I mean, it's a long season. There's plenty of twists and turns to come.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just unfortunate that there's such a stark contrast between the two playing styles on this weekend, where it's sort of everything that could go right went right for Man City, and conversely, I mean, Mourinho's game plan might have been executed perfectly against Liverpool, but it just sort of expressed the very different philosophies of the two managers, I think. It's not to say, of course,
Absolutely.
that you can't win the title, that they will definitely win the title. As you say, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. It's a 38-game season. I think it's just interesting because, as you say, it's given the media and supporters a certain perspective or a certain filter through which they're now going to view those two teams until something changes or until
I
something
mean,
proves them wrong.
it's a huge it's a huge kind of contrast in styles and philosophies where Mourinho's always the pragmatist. He's always going to be kind of pragmatic about results and set teams up in a certain way for every game, kind of quite differently.
And I think this season, more than
Usually to
most, will
kind of
probably give some sort of validation to one of the other playing styles because I can't think. I mean, I can't. I
or
can't
both,
remember back to
potentially
his.
both,
Or potentially both. Absolutely. I mean, if it's a really closely run contest, absolutely can kind of validate both playing styles.
and
I
both
can't,
teams look great in Europe too.
yeah. Well,
So
English
potentially
teams in
for
general are looking really good.
yeah, yeah. Oh, did you watch Roma last night against Chelsea?
I saw a
What
bit
a
of the
game!
highlights, but
Yeah, although it was kind of a bit weird to see Kolarov and Jacko
yeah,
tearing
saw
up on
both on
the
the score sheet.
screen.
Yeah, very strange one. One team not doing so well in Europe at the moment, or at least doing well in an inferior competitions, Arsenal, and they went down to Watford away from home, and we say it's an upset. We look at the form trend though. Watford with only the one loss so far against Man City, which I think is not going to be unusual. And Arsenal sort of capitulating under just a little bit of pressure, a few refereeing decisions not going their way. Deeney in the post-match basically saying that they didn't have the balls for the contest, they didn't have the stuff that would get them across the line. And Marco Silva, my man from last season, Marco Silva
Your
getting
man.
Watford firing, top four now.
Well, I don't think it's going out on too much of a limb, but you know that I like Marco Silva, but he should be Arsenal's man next season, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he keeps doing what he's doing, he plays good football. He can integrate players of different abilities and make them play attractive football. He's obviously got a decent eye in the transfer window. Charlison's been a revelation. I mean, I started picking him up on Football Manager from Fluminense like 2 seasons ago, and he was a gun, and I never heard of him. And then suddenly never seen him in real life, and he turned up at Watford, and he's just like direct. I love direct wingers who kind of cut in and direct forwards and have a go at the defenders. And I mean, I don't think Troy Deeney said anything that most fans and pundits haven't been thinking for quite some time, years. That Arsenal don't have any balls. They just don't. They don't have any. Well, I'm not even trying to be harsh, but compared to teams of be it the Invincibles and those kind of great Bender teams built around these solid cores of players with high character players, they just don't have that in their team these days. It's sort of fair weather players. And Watford showed grit.
It's all summed up with Granit Xhaka standing on the edge of the box, picking his nose while Tom Cleverley scores the winner. So it's just, I don't know what it is about them and how that mentality just pervades all of their players, whether it's in the dressing room, whether it's Wenger and his attitude, or whether it's just sort of a culture passed on amongst the playing group, that they just don't have that steel and determination. And I think it's going to be a very interesting season for Wenger, and the fact that he's there for, next season as well, potentially. This club's just going to keep going backwards.
Absolutely. And, we haven't even mentioned the fact that Wenger has, started talking about potentially cashing in on Alexis Sanchez and Mesut Ozil in January. Because
what sort of reaction do you think that would get?
Oh, I don't think it'd be any. I think it'd be better for them to cash in. They'd get more for cashing in now than they would in kind of in summer. More respect from the fan base. If Ozil comes to United and Sanchez goes to City in the summer for free, they'll burn the library down. So, I think that'd be the move. I think from a fan's perspective, though, the lying will be what hurts. So they'll be very anti-Wenger on the fact that, this whole I'm confident they're going to sign new deals and nothing's been done to strengthen the squad sufficiently to appease these players. If Wenger really knew that they were leaving, why did he leave it this long? He could have got some value for them in the summer, when Arsenal turned down, it was 40 or 50 million for Alexis Sanchez. They turned that down with 1 year to go. If you don't lease it free or lease it 20 million in January, he looks like an idiot. And they're not going to be able to replace that those calibre of players without top four football. So it's not looking great for Wenger. And going back to Watford and Marco Silva, I think he's perfect for them. Absolutely perfect.
And it's going to be an interesting one when Sanchez and Ozil do leave. Yeah. Apart from Lacazette and I don't even know who beyond that you could really class as a top-end talent. They suddenly don't look like a top four squad. They look more like a 6th or 7th place squad. And as poorly as they're going, if Everton could get a decent manager in, all of a sudden Everton could potentially leapfrog Arsenal. And we'll actually, funnily enough, be talking about that team matchup in a second. But it's really worrying signs for Arsenal. And they've really, I think... the name's escaping me now. Their minority shareholder, who's made it pretty clear on a number of occasions that if he had the majority, was saying that he would run the club very differently, and it kind of conveys, I guess, his attitude and his opinion on the way the club's being run at the moment.
Well, he's got more money than Abramovich, let's put it that way, and he hasn't got anywhere to kind of park it. He's not kind of leasing the club against his ranches in the US and US football team and basketball team investments like Stan Kroenke is. And money is not an issue for him. And he said for years that he'd get rid of Wenger, put in a far better manager, and just give them as much money as they need to compete at the top. So he would be like the new Abramovich for them, circa 2003, 2004. And he's a bit shady, but Stan Kroenke is certainly no saint. Let's be clear about that. He's certainly no saint. So I mean that would be ideal. But Kroenke keeps trying to. Well, he bid for Usmanov's stake, and Usmanov told him to piss off. And I can see that ownership situation just dragging out and out and out, and it's just terrible for that club. Not that I particularly care, but yeah.
Well, we did just touch on Everton, so we might as well move on to the preview of that game. It's one of the two big clashes this weekend, I would say. Obviously, neither side travelling too well at the moment. Everton pretty much fighting relegation as it stands, or fighting against those relegation spots as it stands. What have you made of Everton's start to the season, and can you actually put it all down to just Ronald Koeman, or do you think there are broader issues at the club?
Well, I think the major issue I kind of touched on probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and it's square pegs and round holes. They don't have the players to play the formation that they're trying to play.
Do you blame Koeman for not getting those players in, or is it Walsh's fault? Is it the owner's fault? Whose feet does the blame lie at, or is it a combination?
It has to be a combination of two. I mean, surely Koeman's gone there, and they've got post having a new, very wealthy owner in Mashiri come in there, been given a lot of money to spend, and you'd have to think there's a collaboration between Walsh and Ronald Koeman on kind of players. So I don't know if they're not getting their targets and they're going for plan Bs and Cs or what's going on there, but what's certainly the case is they haven't brought in the right players to fit the system that they're trying to play. I mean, I think with the players they've got, if they had someone like Marco Silva there, they'd be doing very well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he's going to be someone in demand.
Talent.
It surprises me that both clubs on Merseyside seem to have quite one-eyed approach to the transfer window, and if they don't get their first target, they seemingly don't have any second choices or backup options. I mean, they obviously wanted to get Giroud in the summer, and that came quite close before Giroud put his foot down and said he was staying at Arsenal for whatever reason, I don't know. But surely if you're going to bring in someone like Gylfi Sigurdsson, who's great at a set piece and great at getting the ball into the box, you would bring in a target man. You would bring in, even if it's someone like a Chris Wood, at the time he was still at Leeds, he was relatively cheap, relatively affordable. Surely someone like that is a better alternative than no one, and just having Rooney as your main striker.
Well, Spurs spent, £12 million on Llorente?
Why not get a package deal of the two? Yeah.
He's going to play, 15 games this season, maybe 20. You offer him 38 plus some cup games if he wants it. I mean, that's his main strength is in the air, and you bring in Sigurdsson, whose main strength is crossing the ball on Lukaku's head. Not Lukaku's head, but on the sort of striker's head. So, yeah, you'd think that would be an easy deal to get done. I mean, Giroud would have been amazing for them. I think, again, that was also a product of them messing around and taking too long on that deal. If they'd offered more, offered it earlier, and then offered him ridiculous wages, they could have got him in. And you'd be having quite different conversations about them, about that club right now. But I think they're, assuming they survive this year, they'll be changes in the summer at the top.
Assuming they survive this year, I mean, I can't see Kermit staying out the season. I can't see him staying out the season if they were in that position. And surely they would make a change before January so that they could make changes in January as needed.
January's huge. I mean, interesting to see whether, I mean, yeah, as I said, their owner is very, very wealthy, Mashiri. But a lot of owners aren't going to want, after they've given him, 100 million, say, or more, to spend in the summer, are they really going to want to give him another 50 to 100 mil if he's not performing and hasn't bought the right players? Because we saw this problem with kind of, sorry to revert back to United, but Van Gaal bought a whole bunch of players, and then Mourinho's come in and he's just trying to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Slowly and surely, he's trying to bring in his players and get rid of the Van Gaal signings, which are all on big money. They're all big transfer fees, and you're making losses on these players, and you're subsidising wages and this kind of stuff. So it is a hassle having 2 or 3 windows of mistakes.
Well, it's the same with Spurs after they sold Kane and after they sold Bale.
Do you know something I don't?
Yeah, and the same with Liverpool after they sold Suarez. I mean, you look at players like Markovic, who I think is still on the books at Liverpool, and they're still trying to offload him somewhere. You look at, I mean, Lovren's sort of settled in now, but he was a bit of a shaky one when they first bought him. You look at Spurs bringing in Eriksen, really the only one who's survived out of the players that they bought with the Bale money. And now with the Lukaku money, they haven't learnt from those 2 clubs' mistakes, and they've pretty much made the same mistake of going scattergun and assuming if we bring in 4, 5, 6 players with that money, we can sort of share the load around. But you still need that talisman. You need that strong striker to get the goals when you have the game on the line. And I don't think Rooney's got that in him anymore.
If you got the ambitions that they say they have in kind of top 6, top 4 clubs where they want to be with all this money, and you sell Lukaku for 75 million, you've got to take that 75 million and try and buy an equivalent striker around Europe, or someone that's trying to turn into that. I mean, that's what, like the Southampton model, you sell their players when they're about to hit their peak, and you take that money and you invest it in 2 or 3 players, young players who are going to get to that level across Europe.
Yeah.
You try and find better bargain players. Now, they haven't done that at all. But they've got a lot of money in for Lukaku, and there's plenty of big strikers around Europe that they could have got.
Yeah, but you do that. You replace Lukaku by you bring in maybe a 50 million player or a 45 million player, not Sigurdsson, like an actual striker replacement, and then you spend maybe the other 20 million on a creative playmaker in midfield. But you don't go out and spend 5 million here, 10 million here, 12 million there, sort of thing. You don't scatter the money around like that. Yes, Sigurdsson himself was a lot of money, but it's not. I don't think that's the area that you spend the majority of the money on. You would spend the majority of the money actually replacing the player you sold.
That's right. I mean, they did make two really good signings in Pickford and Keane, and they've both probably been their 2 best players this season. But yeah, they're just missing that. They didn't need these attacking midfielders. They already had plenty at the club last summer before the window opened.
And then they brought in a whole bunch more.
They needed one more winger and a top striker, or an emerging top striker, and there are plenty of them across Europe. And yeah, for some reason
they didn't.
Yeah.
What's your score prediction for this game? I think it's at Goodison. Yeah, it's at Goodison.
2 really struggling to me. Well, this is a hard one. I mean, usually you kind of.
If we thought United Liverpool was boring, wait until we watch this one.
No, this could be,
really open, you reckon?
Yeah, well, I just
Everton can't score a goal though.
Yeah, but I can concede a few. Well, I'll give the Gooners the benefit of the doubt and pencil in a 3-1 win for them.
Fair enough. And then we'll round out the discussion with the final game of the weekend between Spurs and Liverpool. Used to be a pretty traditional shit fight on big footy, but I think it's settled down in recent times and it's now sort of redirected to Spurs Chelsea. No? You still reckon Spurs Liverpool's bigger?
I think it's bubbling under the surface. I think it'll come out close to the kick-off, trust me. Once Wilson Raider starts having a direct face.
Genuine question. Genuine question. Ignoring history, ignoring trophies and first division titles that Liverpool won back when TV was black and white. Who is the bigger club in the Premier League now? Not just in terms of fan base or whatever, but in terms of potential going forward. Do you see Spurs or Liverpool as having the brighter future?
Potential going forward. Well, there's so many factors that come into play with that question. Well, right now Liverpool are clearly a much larger club, and there's very simple recent evidence. I mean, so who was the televised Champions League game on Tuesday night?
Yes, that's true.
Liverpool Maribor ahead of Real Madrid Spurs.
Yeah.
Ahead of Real Madrid against Spurs. Right, so in terms of right now, it's clearly Liverpool.
But do you actually reckon? Do you reckon that Liverpool game drew more viewers than Spurs Real Madrid would have, or do you think it's more just TV networks kind of taking the safe option and saying, oh well, we'll just put Liverpool on because we know that we'll get this, and not really taking that gamble on another club? Do you think there are actually the numbers to justify it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I feel like even as a neutral,
United were getting better numbers in the Europa League than Champions League clubs are getting. English Champions League clubs are getting far less numbers in the Champions League than United were getting playing, Slovenian farmers in Europa.
But surely a neutral tunes in to watch Spurs Real Madrid. A neutral doesn't tune in to watch Liverpool beat up on some backwater team.
Well, a neutral tunes in to watch Real Madrid.
Well, sure, but that's my point. So I still don't understand why Liverpool gets picked over that, but I guess that's another discussion. I just can't look past the fact that Spurs...
Going forward... Look,
they just seem to have so much promise.
It depends on ownership. So Levy and Joe Lewis will be out in probably within 5 years. At most, I'd say, once they move into Wembley. So once they move into the new White Hart Lane, whatever they're going to call it, they'll be gone. This is all like they're getting the stadium ready, and then they'll sell it as a big package to probably a consortium or someone out of the Middle East or China. If that all goes smoothly and they get a decent owner in, and they can keep Pochettino, and they can keep their commitment to youth, which they've got so far, then at least on the field, yeah, Spurs, without question, going forward, you'd rather be them.
And for this game in particular, how do you see the game itself panning out? I think Spurs showed against Real Madrid that they have learnt a bit, and they are a bit of a smarter team than they have been in recent years when it comes to playing clubs that can hit them on the counter and can be quite dangerous. But that being said, Klopp seems to save his best results or his best performances for Spurs, where he can either get a draw when you'd otherwise expect Spurs to win, or can actually knock them off.
Yeah, I mean, Mane still being out's pretty huge for them. You'd have to think that Kane, Ali, and Eriksen will have a significant amount of success against that four. But also, I think that Liverpool will create chances. Is this at Wembley or
Wembley?
Anfield?
I think, yeah. So Kane won't be scoring.
Well, will Spurs be scoring?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll give them the edge 2-1, because without Mane, the threats just aren't really there. You're really relying on that Coutinho kind of 25-yarder into the top bins at the moment for them to get results, because Firmino is in terrible form and is barely chasing either. Sturridge was really cooked. And, Solanke is just not ready. So they just don't have enough forward. Salah, I like my Salah, but his finishing is still questionable. He really needs that striker to... No, well, it is.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw it in the United game as well. Yeah. Liverpool game. He had a good chance and bent it the other wide of the post.
Yeah.
Inside the box on his preferred foot. That's Mo Salah. So, yeah, I'll say 2-1 Spurs.
Yeah, I think I get the sense that Kane might finally break his duck at Wembley for Spurs. I mean, he's already been scoring goals there for England, so I really don't understand what the issue is for him in Spurs colours. But I think that he will manage to get a goal against Liverpool, and I can see them edging it out by the odd goal. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. You'll see whether there's a bit of a shift in power between the two clubs, as everyone on Big
Mm.
Footy loves to discuss endlessly. And it should be a pretty exciting weekend of football all round. So thanks, Bojan.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We'll be back this time next week. And until then, I hope your team wins, and we'll see you on the forum.